Hello. Um, this video is to talk about today is the day of the vote and the few last thoughts we have on the subject, because we've had a wide range of misinformation in the last few days. But firstly, I have to say, the stress of all this and launching our campaign last week caused me to crash for 5 days. Today I'm still coming out of it, and we're in a very hot day, so I'm in the only room I can control the temperature. Curtains are drawn, fans on, so bear with. Apologies for the pixelated video, but this is important, so it's what I say, not what I look like. So hello. I am Managing Director of Stripey Lightbulb CIC. I'm Sally Callow. Last week we launched our new campaign. That is a new collaborative project with the ME community. We've created a new benefit assessment framework to show that a person-centred alternative is available. Anyone that doesn't know anything about benefits, the DWP for decades has deliberately chosen punitive policies and measures to try to keep the welfare bill down. But with all this rhetoric around how the welfare bill is skyrocketing, that's fake information, by the way. Their punitive measures are demonstrably wrong and going in the wrong direction. So what we've done as a social enterprise is create a new framework, and we're encouraging the DWP and the wider government to accept that there isn't only one way to do the welfare system. Compassion, person-centred, will mean that the assessments are more fit for purpose. They won't have to pay out as much money on appeals and court cases because people have had their PIP denied or their universal credit LCWRA denied, because more often than not, I think it's 80% of the time appeals are successful. So that's a waste of money. They're wasting £50 million a year on their punitive policies that, if they did first time round, would actually save money. Anyway, so please do check out our framework. I will show you, just quickly share my screen so you know where it is on our website. That's it. Share. So this is our website. Create a disability benefit assessment process that is fit for purpose. It's on our campaign tab at the top. And then this is it. And as I said, this was in collaboration with the ME community. We've mocked up a PIP form and a WCA form, and this is our report. Just scroll down. See, contents. We've got chapters and everything properly. This is what reform should look like, not rush through at the last minute, ignoring everybody's concerns, which is exactly what has happened. So if I get out of that and go back to the screen, I think you can see me now. Yes, please do read that. That has been sent to the DWP. The DWP have confirmed receipt and they are sharing it internally. So I've no idea what will happen with that. But yesterday, during Liz Kendall's ministerial statement, it was said at least 15 times, we desperately need to get the welfare bill down. There is no alternative. We have to do this. Costs are skyrocketing, etc., etc. We've shown, if you collaborate with disabled organisations and disabled people, disability organisations and disabled people, we can help you to create the alternative that is patient or person-centred, depending on who your target audience is. As for welfare system costs are skyrocketing, it's been said many times in the media this week, actually, in terms of percentage of GDP, the welfare system has not increased for over a decade. Has not increased. So there's that. That was also acknowledged by Stephen Timms in a select committee last week. So all this rhetoric about spiraling costs and, oh my God, exponential rise and, we've got to do something because it's so expensive. Did you know that pension relief costs exactly the same amount of money as disability benefits. Don't hear anything about that though, do you? Possibly because they don't want to pit one group of vulnerable people against another. But you shouldn't vilify one for costing too much money when the other costs exactly the same amount. Right. In terms of final thoughts, the 4 points. We as a social enterprise have asked the DWP who came up with these 4 points. Where did they come from? Because they make no sense. And as yet, after 9 months, we've not been able to get to the bottom of that. But we strongly suspect that because the Labour Party and all governments refer to think tanks rather than experts, we suggest a think tank with no expertise in disability are who have come up with this 4 points. So the government can have sloping shoulders and blame somebody else and then not be transparent about who that somebody else was, but they have no expertise in disability. How do we know that? Because not one disability organisation agrees with the 4 points. Not one. That's how we know it. It doesn't come from anyone with the expertise in disability. Yesterday, in the past week, I've heard a lot of MPs say, oh, we just need clarification that this isn't two-tier, that this isn't going to cause harm. It's pretty self-explanatory. Existing claimants, at the moment, because these concessions that aren't actually concessions, it's still a rubbish bill. These concessions will mean that existing claimants will keep the money they've got. New claimants won't. That's two-tier. But actually it's three-tier because existing claimants who go to reassessments, if they get denied their application, which happens a lot, which is why 80% of appeals are overturned, the risk that, and this is the question that has not been answered. So yeah, okay, their reassessment, according to Liz Kendall yesterday, but she topsy-turvied on her answer about that throughout yesterday's session, so we still don't really know. But she said reassessments of existing claimants will be done on the old criteria, right? But what hasn't been asked is when that's denied and it goes to appeal, will they then be assessed as a new claimant? Because they will have been removed from the welfare system because they lost their reassessment eligibility thing. So because I'm an ME campaigner, because I know about things like the PACE trial and I know some of the mistruths that have come from the DWP, there's plenty in the press in the last few weeks. People have died. Freedom of information requests are necessary to find out what's actually happened. You know, they're quite secretive and sneaky. That's just the nature of DWP. I would not be surprised to find out that the independent assessor companies are incentivized to deny applications, particularly reassessments of existing claimants, because it means that the government will end up saving money. That's the question. That's what I want everyone watching this to ask your MP. They need to know this before they vote. Because it's all right saying existing claimants to be absolutely fine. They will be assessed on pre-existing eligibility criteria. Okay, but all it will take is for an independent assessor to deny that claim, which happens all the time, rightly or wrongly, and then when they go to appeal, they are automatically classed as a new claimant. I can see how that would very easily be done to keep costs down for the DWP. Anyone that's thinking, oh, that's really cynical, that won't happen, please do look at the PACE trial. Please look at all of the history around the DWP and ME. It's there. The evidence is there. Nothing they do is of any surprise to me anymore. I've actually written 12 press releases in the past 10 days. None of them have been published. So if anyone's wondering why I've been quiet, when I have been able to work, the work that I've created hasn't been published, which, you know, there's been an awful lot of PIP and disability output though. So, But something should be being published today. Obviously, I'll share it. And it's related to, I'm not going to give the game away now, but it's related to ME and long COVID being the elephant in the room that has not been raised by MPs or by government. Why do I think it's an issue? Because we are still in a pandemic. Every day someone is getting sick with long COVID. And we know that 50% of the long COVID population meet ME diagnostic criteria at the 1 year point. This is why the ME community has tripled in the past 5 years. That's a fact. I can provide the research evidence. And advocates like myself have been telling the government this for years. Stripey Lightbulb submitted something to the plan for, now what was it called? The Plan for Jobs and Employment Inquiry in 2023, I think it was 2022. And in that, I warned that by ignoring the fact that the pandemic is ongoing, you are risking a huge financial burden on the welfare state, because we know for a fact that only 25% of anyone that meets the ME diagnostic criteria are physically able to work. So we've been saying that for years, and now they're coming up with all these schemes on how to reduce the welfare bill without actually acknowledging the fact that many of these people are people with ME and long COVID who physically cannot work, who may have been misdiagnosed as having a mental health condition, because we know that happens. I speak to people on social media every single day who meets the diagnostic criteria for ME, but their GP has either not known anything about ME, not known what the diagnostic criteria is, because only around 10% of medics anywhere have ever received training on ME. That's why. The government has officially said that the lack of education needs to be addressed. Still hasn't been, though. Or they've been told that they've got a mental health condition. So there's all that going on. And these people, because they've only got a mental health condition and they're told, oh, you can work through, keep going, if they're in employment, they'll be getting assistance from their employer, and they're over time getting less and less energy. I know, because this was me 15 years ago. And you continue with work because you're not being told what's actually wrong with you, and you're in that time waiting for a diagnosis. You're trying to push through. If you don't know that you've got post-exertional malaise, you don't know to hang on, I'm pushing it, I'm making myself worse. So there's massive issues with underdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. These people are not yet on benefits because they do not have an NHS diagnosis or any diagnosis. Some people, there are only, sorry, my ME is bad, so I'm going all around the houses to get to the point. Apologies. In the UK, mostly in England, actually, I don't think there are any specialists in the devolved nations. But the specialists, there are around 4, and they are all private clinicians with an interest and expertise in ME. There are none in the NHS. When you hear of CFS clinics, they just give you talking therapies and some leaflets. When you're actually talking about clinical help, there are literally 4 or 5 people in the whole of the UK that you can refer yourself to. So a tiny minority of people that now have ME or long COVID that meet ME diagnostic criteria are seeing those people and getting a diagnosis. And just while I think about it, this is also a thing that we don't like in this bill, because the DWP will only accept evidence from NHS doctors, which deliberately targets illnesses where patients are already being failed in the NHS because there are no specialists, there are no treatments, there are no cures. Okay, so this just compounds that. So not only can we not get better because it's a massively neglected disease by healthcare in this country and worldwide, but now we can't even get benefits because we're not diagnosed by an NHS doctor. Okay, so I've said that now, so that's fine. That's another thing that was on my list. Why do I have concerns that ME and long COVID is at the core of why this measure is being implemented, so that when this large swathe of people that are currently undiagnosed or misdiagnosed finally get a diagnosis and are able to apply for PIP, it is going to skyrocket. We've been warning about that for years, and the government's done nothing. Right, so there's all this going on, and then the ME delivery plan. Now, I have to admit, I pay very little attention to this because I do not think it's going to deliver anything. I just don't. But it has been postponed again. Yesterday, Sean O'Neill published another article in the Times saying we've been let down again. Part of that delivery plan, that is a government thing, says the poor knowledge base on ME is causing additional problems for the ME community. Now, don't you find it odd that now in the welfare bill, it says you can only get PIP or universal credit with a health element uplift, all that kind of stuff, if you have an NHS diagnosis. But the delivery plan acknowledges that the NHS does not know enough about ME. And very few people are able to diagnose it accurately, properly, actually know what they're talking about. Those two things don't sit right for me. How at exactly the same time, the ME delivery plan has been paused because that would acknowledge that research is grossly underfunded to an obscene level. Anyone that hasn't listened to me rant about this before, I can't remember the exact numbers because my head is all over the place today, but just to give you an idea of the variation. So say ME gets £3 per patient per year. Parkinson's, MS and other similar comparable illnesses get £60 per patient per year. That's the level of obscene disparity in funding that we're currently dealing with. So I personally believe that the pandemic is central to the welfare bill. And they are very quick to say, oh, it's all these youngsters that are too frightened to go to work. They've got all these mental health conditions. There are some that are still anxious about the pandemic because the pandemic is still here. And unlike the rest of the population, they understand the risks. However, I do not think that is the root core of what's going on here. I think the government, in terms of listening, has finally listened to, hang on a minute, they warned us 3 years ago that the welfare bill was going to be in effect. It hasn't happened yet, but if we implement these changes, we can stop all these people from applying, because it's very difficult, and it's as was acknowledged in Parliament yesterday, people with fluctuating conditions struggle to successfully apply for PIP. The application forms for PIP and the WCA form are not fit for purpose. It's square peg, round hole. And this is why all these TikTok influencers that say, if you struggle to fill in the form, these are our tips. Not because they're helping people pull a fast one. It's because it's like a Krypton factor exercise on how to word your answers, that you're not lying, but you know how to word them in exactly the right way, so that round peg gets the edges on it, so that it fits in the, you know what I'm trying to say, so that round peg fits in the square hole a little bit better. But that's why we've created an assessment framework, because we've shown just by changing the questions on the application form, you are making that application more appropriate for our disease. But in it, I've also said that there are many other conditions that have got nothing to do with ME. The organisations who represent those communities will be able to help you create a framework so that your questions are appropriate for that illness. And like ME is specific and very niche because of post-exertional malaise. We have very specific needs. There's one very specific symptom that most in the DWP, most in the NHS and wider healthcare have absolutely no idea about. But it is central to why we are physically unable to work, or if we are in work, why we have to have reasonable adjustments and why we have additional costs. So, for example, if you've got cognitive dysfunction, you won't be able to drive to work. Going on a bus would absolutely exhaust you. So did me. I find public transport exhausting. There's no point getting a bus to work when by the time I get to work, I can't function because I've lost all my energy. So PIP would go on things like getting taxis to and from work, or if you were able to work from home, equipment to allow you to work from home, that kind of thing. Anyway, so just because you've got a fluctuating illness does not mean you are not eligible for PIP. But the 4 points rules out a heck of a lot of the ME community, because I did a bit of research and evidence gathering as part of our framework assessment thing. And so many people with ME got in touch and said, yeah, I'm on PIP, but I've got 2 points, 2 points, 3 points, 3 points. I would say only about, of those that messaged me, only about 20% had actually achieved 4 points in any one category. And fluctuations were the big issue. And throughout their assessment, the assessor kept saying, oh, but on a good day, what can you do? And then I've been in this situation. You have to kind of say, I never have a good day. I feel really unwell every day. But some days are worse than others. So I have better days and I have worse days. Assessors, when they write up their report, on good days, she has no problems whatsoever. Now, that's not what is being said. Anyone that's never been through a PIP process, it has been said to me by other healthcare professionals that people that work for the DWP, independent assessors, have sold their soul to the devil. They are prepared to lie to save money for their company and the DWP, which is why everybody that deals with the DWP is a cynic. Because I think even if they got trained, they would have, as I said earlier, they would probably be incentivized, a bit like a driving instructor. You can only pass this amount of people this week. I wouldn't be surprised if anybody wants to do an FOI and find out what money has been offered to Capita, or is it Maximus, I think is the other one, or were they're the old one or the new one? Can't think. I'd be very surprised if there isn't some kind of incentive in denying the initial application or reassessment so that they can be reclassified as a new claimant when they get to the appeal. What else have I written down here? I had to write it down when my brain is really not working today. Oh, a biggie that I have not seen mentioned, or if I have, maybe once. Pension age change. So, the pension age was changed to 66 from, and people were kind of moved. It was rolled out over a 2-year period, 2018 to 2020, right? So the pension age was raised to 66. Anyone that had been clinging on to, oh, I'm just desperate to reach my pension age, I'm really struggling with my health, but I'll reach pension age and then I'll be fine. It's fine. I can drop out of work, that's fine. Would then have had to work additional years. So there are a heck of a lot of people, I did have the figure in my head, but it's gone, but there are a heck of a lot of people that have been put onto PIP because they can no longer retire when they were planning to retire with ill health, that are now on PIP. But did you know this? You cannot apply for PIP if you are already on a pension, right? But if you are on PIP before you retire, you can continue on PIP alongside your pension. So the government has pushed back the age to get more work out of more people, to save money. But actually, it's self-harm, because now they're paying them benefits before, not all, and obviously this is not a comment on those people. If you have ill health, you have ill health. There's nothing you can do about it. No judgment from me. But I'm just thinking in terms of, why didn't they just keep the retirement age where it was? Because then that person would have just gone on to retirement with their ill health, not had to drop out of employment. But now they will have been on PIP and been able to stay in or leave work, and then also get pension. So they're getting 2 lots of money. How does that, and that's coincided with this rise that I have yet to see evidence of, rise in PIP claims. It's self-harm by the governments, plural, for increasing the pension age, because whether they want to keep people in work or not does not negate the fact that as you get older, you have more and more and more health problems. That's a fact. Even me, I turn 50 next year, and I'm now having physio for all sorts of things. And I've been told, yeah, once you hit 40, everything starts going wrong. So it's a medical fact that the older you get, the more health problems you have. So, of course, more and more people will be meeting the criteria for disability. More and more people, as they get older, will be eligible for PIP, whether they are in work or not. But obviously, if you're on PIP and you don't have to work to be on PIP, those people rightly will say, well, I know you've pushed my pension age back, but now that I'm on PIP, I can drop out of work. So how has that actually benefited the economy? That needs to be spoken about a little bit more, I think. But as I said, the GDP percentage for benefit costs has stayed exactly the same for a decade in terms of the percentage of GDP. So I think that was all of my points. Keep your eyes peeled for the article that I've written. Obviously, I'll be posting the link absolutely everywhere. But I would say to any MP, do not vote for this. Oh, something that I was tweeting yesterday. I think that an awful lot of MPs are thinking, well, it doesn't really make any sense for Stephen Timms to be doing the PIP review after we've voted for this thing. No, it doesn't make sense. Use your gut instinct. It doesn't make sense. And his results are going to come out right when the new eligibility criteria is implemented. So if it comes at the end of that consultation period, when people have said, no, it's not going to work, don't do it, it's making the best of a very bad situation. The timing is all off. Sorry, my words are going now. I knew I shouldn't have changed the subject right at the end. But any MP thinking that this consultation period for the PIP review is going to be proactive or going to iron out any of the problems, it won't. I can categorically say for the past 9 months, as Stripey Lightbulb, I've been attending a myriad of DWP, government and disability organisation meetings. And throughout all of those meetings, we've been told this consultation is only on point blah, and this point. We will not ask for your opinion on 4 points and other issues. That's why nothing's been ironed out. So when they say, oh, we've been talking to... No, you haven't. You've only been talking about the very narrow things that you want to talk about, not the things that are at the actual core of the issue. Because as I've said already, absolutely no disability organisation would have agreed to the 4 points. Not one. And there are hundreds of disability organisations. But yeah, so please don't think that this consultation will iron out the problems, because it will not do that. I've been in meetings with Stephen Timms and he's literally said, I won't answer questions on that. I'm happy to answer questions about XYZ though. And it's like, well, we don't want to talk about XYZ. We've got concerns about all of this stuff going on over here. So, yes, please bear that in mind. Tag your MP. I'm going to do little tiny short extracts of this. Tag your MP. Let's try and grab as many of them as possible, because I think they've been reassured by these concessions. I have no idea why. If they knew anything about the DWP or benefits, they would know that nothing is going to work out well for disabled people. It's going to create a two-tier system. Too many are going to have benefits taken off them when they get their PIP or WCA declined. Anyway, yeah, please do share. I'm going now before my brain stops altogether. Thank you very much for listening.